Now we're going to go ahead and switch gears and go with something that's a little bit different from what we've done in the past on the Audio Programmer Meetup. So many of us come from music composition, musicians. I come from a DJing background. There are people that come from the game audio world, sound design. And a few months ago, Jonas and Luke and I met initially at Unreal Fest in Seattle, which was a game audio for Unreal Engine, or a game conference for Unreal Engine. And I was so fascinated by what they were doing, and it gave me so many different ideas that we wanted to get them on the channel just so to help spur on ideas and help talk about the awesome things that they were doing. So I thought it'd be great just to get them on here. So Reactional is a procedural music system for game audio, and I can see so many other uses for this as well. And they're going to be talking about their engine and the work they've been doing and their API and their vision for the future of game audio. And so with that, I'll go ahead and pass the virtual mic over to Jonas and Luke.
Thank you so much. Firstly, I'd like to introduce Luke Ritchie. He's a huge player in our team, doing all of the biz stuff that we don't want to do, but he does it in stride. So would you tell us some more about yourself, Luke?
Yeah, I'm not going to talk much on this session, but yeah, I've worked with Reactional for 3 years, and yeah, I'm on the business development, customer facing side of things. My background's in music. I'm a musician, but worked in tech for a long time. I actually worked at the Philharmonia Orchestra in London and did some work for the San Francisco Symphony. Did a lot of work in music, and we were doing more and more projects in game engine, starting in VR, going into real time projects with Epic Games and other partners. And I just realized that had massive implications for composition, and that's how I met Jonas. We did a project together with a bunch of partners, and I just got really excited about the concept of composable procedural music, and the idea of how we can compose music for interactive landscapes. So I can jump in later if needs be, but I'm going to hand back to Jonas, and he can take it away.
Don't I get an intro, Luke?
I'm going to let you do that. You'll do it better than me.
Sure. Okay. So I am from Sweden. It's very cold here today, and looks much nicer over at Matt's. And yeah, I am originally a composer. I studied electroacoustic composition, and whilst doing that, I did a lot of fun projects and prototypes with Max MSP and later Super Collider. Um, my pride and joy from that period was this installation where I had a depth camera that would analyze your face and then measure it according to the golden ratio, and then generate a piece of music based on how ugly you were compared to the beauty standards. So that was fun. But after graduating, I realized making a living doing sound installations and very strange electronic music is hard. So that's why I started composing for games. And after having done that for a bit, I also started doing implementation in the game engines for sound design and game audio and building fun little systems in the engines, designing music systems. And then, of course, I met one of the other founders, Jesper, who had invented this compositional iPad app where you would input a lot of musical rules and then you could via your fingers perform on these rules and generate music materials. And whilst we worked on the second version of this app, I started badgering him and the others in the team to let's move into games. Like games is cool, everybody loves games, but they don't love games. So they said, no, games is not for us. But then we met some potential investors and they said, have you looked into games? There's a lot of money in games. So then we started doing games. Yeah, so we started design or redesign our music tech to then be a procedural playback system for games. I guess the reason for doing so, like, I'm actually going to show you this slide from when we met Joshua describing the interactive music history. Here we go. So this is a graph that I made up. So it's kind of true, I think. But back in early video game, music was being generated on the hardware via chip. Eventually, we got these Sound Blaster cards or sound cards that had, general MIDI sound banks built into them, and then suddenly the games would play back music through those sound sets. But in all of this period, music was actually being generated on the fly as the game was playing. Then the big bad wolf of CD-ROM audio happened, so suddenly you could have fancy recorded music in your games. And suddenly we lost all of the potential interactivity that we had before. There were some systems, iMuse from LucasArts, for instance, that MIDI-based, played note by note, and it could, interpolate between different states and stuff. But all of that was lost because of CD-ROM audio. And then, of course, the way that game music is done today and has been for at least 25 years is that you have stems exported as loops, and then you switch between these different loop sections or fade up and down stems. It's a bit ironic because the rest of video game technology has made these massive leaps since then, but we're still playing back loops over and over, playing back loops. We figured that, do we really need to have realistic physics for eyelashes and hair that moves naturally when we're still doing loops in music? So that's why we then started doing the Reactional music system. So Unreal is actually kind of championing procedural audio at the moment. So they have a timing system called Quartz, which lets you finally play back sound sample accurately, which, like, up until that point, I did some games in Unreal, and I tried to have music systems where even stems would play in sync together, but they would always drift eventually because you couldn't schedule the changes. But now we can actually do that. And then they made this thing called meta sound, which is basically max MSP, but running in Unreal. And it's super cool. So I wish that existed when I was studying and doing my fun installations, because then instead of going via, max MSP or super collider and then piping everything via, say, open frameworks or processing for graphics, you could do everything in Unreal these days. Now, we talked about the reasons for doing note by note, and that is what this slide before here said, that sonically music in games is great today, but it's not interactive at all. So I think I'll jump into some live demoing. We have a set of tools. Of course, we have plugins for game engines. Currently Unreal and Unity, but soon launching a Godot plugin as well. Our engine also runs in the browser via WebAssembly. It's a kind of small library written in C, but the tools around it sort of are responsible for front end and similar things. So here is a session of a composition that I composed in Reaper, one of the DAWs that we support. In game audio, everybody loves Reaper. I'm not sure how prominent it is in music production or in your field, Joshua.
Everybody loves it.
Everybody loves it, yeah. Awesome. Yeah, I love Reaper as well. As such, Reaper was the first DAW that we supported, and I'm going to play you a short snippet here. Is that coming through?
Yep.
Yeah, so a generic run-of-the-mill, it's very exciting action sequence. Now, one of the other things that we really wanted to, or I really wanted to get away from as a games composer, was the endless exporting of all these assets, like all these loops and stems and whatnot. And of course, in Reaper, you can do a batch render, a script for all of that stuff, which is great and all. But then you still need to put it into a middleware or inside the game engines and hook everything up, and that takes ages as well. And if you need to change something, you need to redo everything again. So with our system, you drag and drop your actual DAW session into our authoring tool called Reactional Composer. So we'll do that now, actually. Bloop. And then it renders everything needed for note-by-note playback inside our system, and that takes around 30-40 seconds or so. So we do that by parsing the Reaper session and getting everything that we need in terms of MIDI and settings and whatnot. And then we have our own headless little audio system running in the background, rendering everything. So in order for this to actually import, what's important is that we rely on naming schemes. So for instance, this one is prepended by performer. If I were to remove that thing, then this instrument would not be accounted for. What's going on here? And likewise goes for these regions. If they're called part, colon, something, then we'll bring them into the system as well. There's also a concept of stingers, which is just a very short musical frame, a phrase or a chord or something that generally in a video game you would have, like when an exciting hit happens, then you bring on some big horns or a taiko drum or something. Let's go into Reactional Composer then. So it is a MIDI-based playback solution. We need the composers to use VST3 instruments for this all to work. And now in here we can start designing these interactive macros, we call them. And we can name them to something cool. And then we can start adding these MIDI effects to this session. So we'll drop some of them in here. And we can, of course, do complex plugin chains where this value will affect the different plugins independently. But for showcasing this is simpler. Let's see, let's do one of those maybe. A velocity maybe we can have as well. Transpose. So in a minute I'll play this back, and when I am moving these around, then you'll hear how the music adapts. And of course you see this list of names here. These are the instruments in my session, and I can also then target only specific instruments if I want to. Fingers crossed, no demo ghosts. Let's hit play. And it works. How's the volume? Can you hear me?
It's good. Yeah.
It's good, yeah. So the most obvious thing is to control the tempo of the music. And I mean, for music producers and composers, that's like, okay, so you control the tempo, but in game music, you can't control tempo. It's ridiculous. You have loops, so you're stuck with the tempo. We can also mess with the rhythm, of course. So here's a swing effect. It's pretty neat. This one will randomly push the onset of certain instruments. You get these rhythmic variances. Makes it move a bit. A note probability, so I guess you could figure that out by the name. So you can scale back the music. And then it's exciting again. and this was just velocity. But the most fun bits is when you start to mess with the harmonic content. So here we have a plugin that does modal transposition. So with very little means, we can have something that starts to sound quite different from the starting point. I like this combo because it sounds like Enya, and growing up my mom would always play Enya. Let's bring this back up here. Now, since these are all sampler instruments, or since playing back live inside the game, we can also override these instruments at any point and have the game developer via a simple method call do so as well. So let's play this bit again. So if you listen for the violin, now it's quiet because I've taken control of it, so I can now play on it. And of course, that can be used to Mickey Mouse certain effects in the game, or have the gamers actually perform on in-game instruments. And again, going back to what I mentioned about stingers, so we can trigger them and preview them here. And if we change the key, they will always adapt. So that also means that for a composer, you only need to compose these elements once in a single chord, and then you can play them at any point in the soundtrack, just trigger them and they will adapt to the underlying chord. Now, I think our title was something like from composed music to interactive in 10 minutes or so. So I thought we'd go from here and put it inside of Unity quickly. Let's see here. Let's take this from, just going to change some values. And maybe just for the sake of this demo, I don't know. This quant dial will then also tell the system when it's allowed to trigger these effects. So we have, let's do also a probability on this one. So now we'll export. And we already had one there. Let's remove that first. Loop. This testing here. We're in Unity, and here's our plugin. Now that export has been loaded, and I have set up a simple script here that will check the range of, or the distance between two game objects, one being the player character here, the little one, and the other one being this big giant. And after it has done so, you can remap the range as well. Then we set this control, the macro, with the name given and this normalized value. And we call it something cool. spelled correctly, something cool. And now as I hit play, the music will then automatically adapt, hopefully. Obviously, you need to tune your parameters so it makes sense musically. Before we leave this scene, you see this keyboard here, and that's playing back the actual notes generated by the system. So everything generates a callback into the game, so you can hook up game events to any event created by the music system. And there is no protection against making ugly mappings and music, so but hopefully you get the idea of what's possible with a system like this. Maybe this is a good place to stop for questions, if there are any.
I don't see any questions at the moment. If anybody has any questions, please feel free to ask. One question that I had is, do you have any plans for audio with this, or have you done any experiments with that?
Yeah, so we have experimented, of course, but when you're saying audio, I'm guessing we're talking about essentially instrument separation and then cutting that up to be able to change key and similar things. As far as I know, or what we concluded, is that's still pretty dark arts. Yeah, so I'd love to be able to, take a piece and change the rhythms and the key and stuff of that live. But for now, I don't see that happening. I've done some fun experiments before where actually when Melodyne first came out, it was a big hobby of mine to rearrange particular choral arrangements into different keys and changing the onsets and stuff. But doing that live, I think we're a bit ways off still.
When you get licensing for a track or for a composition, do they give you the stems? How does that work exactly?
Not sure I follow now.
So you said so you have licensing rights, right? From
Yes, so actually that's the second big part of our business that we're coming to now. So this is only our interactive system that deals with MIDI-based compositions inside games. But then what we also have, and it's on this web page. Here is our online platform for game developers, where if they perhaps not have a musician on board, they can find pre-composed interactive themes, such as the one you heard. Or for any developer, really, if they want to license commercial music assets, they can do so via our catalog here. And for all of this music, this is not music that we can actually change, or we're not even allowed to change those, because the rights that we have secured prohibits anyone from messing with the masters, essentially. So they're licensed but playing back as original is. However, all of that music we run through an analysis pipeline, which gives us lots of metadata on tempo, chords, key, sections of the song, etc. And with that information, our interactive system can adapt and play on top of this music. So as a demo of that, click here. So here you first hear a familiar piece. And this is now in browser. However, what we can do is connect these. So here is a song by Milky Chance, like a club track. with a guitar intro, and I'm gonna bring up this interactive music to play together with this.
You make me feel like a reckless child. Just because of you, I get so damn high. I don't even know how to get back down. Only if you pull me back to the ground.
So if we take out the club track, then you can just hear the chords, but being played back through the interactive music system. And we talked about stingers before, and here we can then trigger stingers that will fit to this song instead. Now, the main use case for this is not really to do mashups, but rather to, perhaps in a game you have a particular section of the game where you want to license a commercial track, and licensing music into games thus far has been super, super hard and very, very expensive, and only really reserved for the very big players, AAA studios, where they pay large sums of money to license music that is also licensed on a time basis. So eventually they run out of time for the rights to those tracks in their games, and then also pull those games from the actual stores. So you can see that happen quite often, where a game might sell for 90% off because it's been taken off the store forever because they have no more rights to the music in that game. So that's also something that we hope to solve here. So all of the music that we have available for licensing is also in perpetuity and worldwide. It allows any developer, regardless of their budget or size, to license music into the games without having to go through all the hoops with lawyers and sync departments and stuff. So the main use case for combining these interactive layers with the commercial tracks, or you could also upload your own linear stereo mixes, and it will also be analyzed and be able to play back with the interactive system. But the main use case for this is probably more to make fun games like, let's see, it's called Music Hustler. Hustler tutorial. Wrong. So here is, if you ever played Tetris Effect, it's like a Tetris game, but set to music. So this is my own version of that using our library. So you'll hear some actually different tracks being played, but on top of that, whenever a piece moves, there's a piano note being generated. And whenever a block drops, you get a stinger, and everything is happening to the beat of the music. So everything is more fun with music, of course. And this is actually a project that is available for download on GitHub. And also there's some tutorial info on how to set up a game like this. So we also, obviously I'm quite skilled at using our own tools. But for me, going from Tetris to Music Tetris was less than an hour's work. Obviously, it's going to take longer if you've never used the library before, but we're hoping that this is also a way to democratize making these kinds of games where you don't have to build your own beat systems or beat clocks or similar things just to be able to make a simple music game. Another thing we're also doing with our licensing catalog is allowing developers to also directly sell music to the gamers, meaning if you're making a music game, for instance, it might be very expensive for you as a developer to have a lot of catalog for the gamers to play from. But if they want to, they can, without paying anything upfront, offer millions of tracks from this library directly to the gamers as DLC content. So then you can scale the game up very much and have many more levels of gameplay for their gamers to play. Do we have any questions now? Do you have anything to add, Luke?
No, I mean, because I think we've got, possible programmers watching this, I don't know if it's worth just quickly showing some examples of the API in Unity. I think you kind of already showed that, but just some of those scripts. That might just be one last thing's worth showing.
I can actually show from Unreal here also. So the basic API for controlling music is very simple. It's like this. If you ever used blueprints in Unreal, that's what it looks like. But meta sounds, for instance, is very easy to integrate with. And so what we do with our libraries, we generate a PCM buffer, and then we can push that into whatever audio system is available. So in this case, it's an example how this node in Unreal Metasounds works. So we have our buffer that we get from our render function, and then we just copy that into the output. And that's really all you need in order to make your own nodes in Metasound. So if you have something that can generate sounds, this is really all you need to get that going inside a Metasound node. I'm not sure if, for instance, Juice already, I would bet someone that already has made a Juice integration for Unreal and Metasound, but if not, that's how you would do it. Here is another example of these callbacks that you can get from the system into Unreal. So here is Metasound for getting note-ons and note-offs. But you can also get them in the main thread to control other aspects of the game with one of these callbacks as well. As for Unity, so the same thing in Unity is on this script here. So all of the scripts in the plugins are also readable and editable by the user if they want to mess with it. However, our proprietary tech is in a binary DLL. But yeah, for Unity, they have something called onAudioFilterRead. It's not the most performant functions, but if you're not using it on too many objects, it's totally fine. And then we do our render here and pass this data into the audio filter read, and they will make it end up in one of the audio sources here. And this can then later be used to spatialize it inside the game world if you want to, or add additional post effects. It's the same setup if you're working with a middleware like Wise or Fmod. We can push that buffer into their input buffer streams, and then you can mix them with the rest of your game audio. I would have loved to show you more in-depth code also from how the library is set up, but that it's kind of secret sauce. But I'm happy to answer questions on it, of course.
Yeah, have you ever considered this would be very different from other offerings that they have, but have you ever considered writing a Juice integration for this?
We've actually played with the idea, like when we some years ago went with this route, like how would we get this music into our system? Would we make plugins that would then live inside the DAW where you make your settings, or then what happens if we have different DAWs with different plugin formats and it would soon be hard to handle, and that's why we decided going with the route to have an external software where you instead reverse engineer the file formats if they're not readable, and then grab everything we need. However, I'd love to have a some Juice plugins where you would basically get all of these, because these are more or less just MIDI plugins, right? But it would be super nice to be able to have your composition and then quickly just change the key and see what it feels like. And I think some DAWs have similar support for that kind of operations, like Studio One, I think, does that. But also a problem is that we're kind of working with the music in a non-linear way, whereas most DAWs have some kind of linear sense to how things are working. And we do get a lot of requests when showing it off that people would like to use it as a material generator, if you will. And I think like adding support for MIDI out from our tool would not be very hard. There is no plans of yet to make a specific DAW plugin though for these kinds of things. I'd love to do it though, but there are some use bits inside this though. So we're not totally out of the loop there.
What
Right.
about just what about just simple MIDI plugins that break down some of the things that you
Mm.
do? Have you considered that?
Um, I think it's a bandwidth thing mostly for us. We'd love to do it, but we're doing too many things already. I think we're all on the cusp of burnout because we have too many fires that we're dousing and irons in those fires. And now the lights turned off. But yeah, if anybody wants to do these things with us, for us, or collaborate on that, we'd love to hear about it.
Yeah, because I just think that the idea of when I saw your Unreal Fest presentation, the first thing that I thought of was how awesome it is just to be able to riff new ideas off
Yeah.
of. It was like jamming within your own composition, and I thought that was really interesting.
Mm.
Well,
Yeah.
we should chat, Josh. The only thing I was going to add, Mr. Salesman, is that you can download the Unity and Unreal SDKs off reactionalmusic.com, and all the documentation and a lot of the deep kind of tutorial videos that Jonas has put together. So that's just there for you to try, and you can download it, add tracks, compose your own themes with our composer tool, which you can download for free. And there's like a 30-day free trial. And then there's different payment plans on the pricing page, which you can have a look at.
And to clarify, those pricings are for game developers looking to input that inside a game. If you're just a muso looking to play around with it, you could just do that.
Yep.
Currently, we support Reaper, Ableton just since last week, Bitwig, Studio One, and Cubase via DAW project. But yeah, Reaper is the most stable now if you're a Reaper fan, and who isn't?
There is a question, do you provide instrument samples as well? How did Unity play the Reaper synths?
Right, so we render audio from the actual VSTs that you put inside your session. So there is a contact patch. And yeah, that's being rendered out into a lot of different musical material. And that is then being played back by our own playback engine. And that is running inside Unity as well. So the export from a composer into Unity is this garbage, no, not garbage, but garbled file format. So a huge thing, since we're dealing with music licensing as well, so a huge thing was from the music industry to make it as hard as possible to steal their music, because everybody does that these days. But yeah, so that goes for these files as well. And yeah, all of the audio data is then baked into these monoliths, if you will. So you also cannot play back a sound from one exported track inside another. They're sort of like tied to that composition, and that is key for us. That's just as how you as a composer would compose with the VSTs that you have, and then you have a rendered mix. We see it as the same thing, only that it's not linear, I guess.
Cool. I think that's all we have for questions. Is there anything else that we should mention here? How do people get in touch with you?
Go on, Jens. Well, I was just going to say you can go on reactionalmusic.com. I think we can put it in the description. Get in touch with me, Luke.Ritchie, Ritchie, at reactionalmusic.com. We'll put our details below, but you can sign up and just get in touch via the website or LinkedIn or join our Discord server as well. Very welcome to do that.
Yeah, you can find links to all that from within the Reactional platform. Since this is a recorded video, I can then show you this slide, because then people can actually scan that QR code. That only takes you to our website though, but at least that's something.
We'll also be sure to put the details in the video description below as well.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Cool. Thank you so much, Luke and Jonas, for that. That's awesome. I think there are many untapped ideas that are inside that can be used. So I think that's awesome. I think we'll go ahead and wrap up this meetup. Once again, thank you to sponsors Focusrite and JetBrains for all their support for the meetup. Thank you to the presenters, Jonas, Luke, and Matt. It's great to have you here, and we'll be back in January. So the next date for the meetup is going to be the 14th of January, which is back to our normal slot of the second Tuesday of the month. In the meantime, if you'd like to submit a talk for the audio programmer meetup, you can do so on the audioprogrammer.com/meetups. Also be sure to join our Discord community on the audioprogrammer.com/community. We've just broken 11,000 members there, developers from all around the world talking about all types of cool stuff. So no matter where you may be in your audio programming journey, be sure to come and check us out. And in the meantime, happy holidays, and be sure to have a happy new year. And from us to you, we're going to go ahead and sign off. Have a great one and speak soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.